Hi, my name is Jara. I teach people how to garden and grow food. I wanted to show you guys my process for either starting a brand new garden or expanding an existing garden. Also just planning in general and staying organized, making sure that I grow enough crops for each person in my household. So it can kind of seem like a daunting thing, especially if you're a new gardener. Like, how do you begin? Where do you get materials? What are the pros and cons of using pressure treated wood versus just starting straight in your native soil? So this is going to be a long guide, but I hope that it answers all of your questions and really encourages you, especially if you're a brand new gardener, to get started. So I've broken this down into like 4 steps. You've got your building stage, planting stage, seed starting stage, and then the actual transplanting stage. So that's basically taking you from beginning, building the garden, getting it ready, all the way to finally planting it. So I broke it down into 4 pieces, and then I broke that down into 2 separate videos. So make sure you subscribe to my channel. That way you get notified of when I release new videos, and you can search for the second or part 2 of this video in my video list. So step number 1 is the building stage. You need to build the growing area. First, if you're brand new, you need to walk around your property, assess the daylight. What sections of your property have full sun? What sections are maybe partial shade or just plain full shade? Hopefully you have some sections that are full sun. That is the best. That would be the best part for you to start a garden and grow your crops. Most crops, especially vegetable crops, require full sun so that they can get all that energy and grow big in order to output vegetables or fruit. So ideally, you want to find the spot that gets the most sunlight in any single day. You also want to examine the terrain. Is it an area that floods a lot? That probably isn't going to be the best for gardening, depending on how much flooding. Personally, I'm in Florida. We get a lot of flooding. I mean, we get monsoon rains every summer, so my backyard floods a lot. So I have a tendency to garden in raised beds or like grow bags, containers, things to get my plants up off the ground, and then flooding isn't that much of a problem. So now that you've identified the perfect spot to start a garden, the next step is to clear it out. You're gonna have to remove any trees, branches, bushes, but most importantly, any weeds or maybe existing lawn. And lawn is probably the hardest out of all of that, in my opinion. But basically, I use 2 different methods to accomplish the cleaning out process. The first one is the longest method, but truly, honestly, it's the best in my opinion. And that is solarizing that entire ground. So you're gonna find the proper material for solarizing, which is clear plastic. So a big clear plastic tarp. You're gonna lay that down over the surface, and it's going to basically trap the sun's heat, and it will kill any of the weeds, lawn, grass, seeds that exist in that area. And that lasts for a long time. It's very effective. It's gonna last for a couple months before you even have to weed anything again. However, that takes some pre-planning and like forethought, because it takes a couple weeks to a couple months for that to occur and finally be, you know, all dead and cleaned out for you. If you have to start a garden right away though, this is the method that I've used many times. You're gonna take you're gonna gather a lot of cardboard, and I get free cardboard from my grocery stores. If you go in there and you ask the manager, like, hey, do you have any free cardboard I could take? Usually they're very happy to just give you a lot of cardboard, because their employees have to package that stuff down and throw it away and dispose of it. So they're happy if someone just comes and like picks that stuff up. So I would ask around your like local grocery stores, and then you're going to lay down 2 to 3 layers of cardboard over your lawn or whatever, that section. And it has to be a couple layers, not just one, because the weeds and stuff, especially if you have like St. Augustine grass, like what we have here, or crabgrass in Florida, that stuff is tough, and it will even poke through the 1 layer of cardboard. So I suggest 2 or 3 layers of cardboard, and that will smother everything out. Then you're going to also place on top of that like 3 to 5 inches worth of compost. So you've got your layer of cardboard, you got 3 to 5 inches of compost, and it's ready to plant in there right away that same day if you wanted to. So However, this method works really good more so with transplants, not direct sowing seeds, but transplants, because I will take a small garden shovel and I'll poke straight down through the cardboard to make a hole for that transplant to be inserted in there, and then you can start growing your garden. Over time, that cardboard will smother out the weeds, grass, all of that that's underneath it. And another really added benefit of doing that is that earthworms love paper products, cardboard, papers, whatever. They love that stuff. So any sections in my garden that I have started through this method are full of earthworms, which is really awesome. Earthworms, if you didn't know, the reason why you want a lot of earthworms in your garden beds is because, well, they eat decaying material and they poop that stuff out, which is very nutritious for your plants. It's free compost right there basically for you. So having a lot of earthworms is really beneficial for your plants. The only con to the cardboard method is that it doesn't last that long when it comes to like killing the weeds, especially if you have like torpedo or crabgrass. That stuff has a tendency to just kind of survive, like the roots of those will survive and they'll continue spreading after so many months. So you will have to start weeding that patch at some point. If you really want to like eliminate weeds for a long period of time, definitely the solarizing method is preferred. You may have noticed that I have this weed blocking material over several of my raised beds, or even just straight across the soil and parts of my garden. And the reason why I use this is to help prevent weeds. So I'm one person and I manage 2 gardens. This is my home garden, and I have a second garden on 2.5 acres in St. Cloud, Florida. And it's just impossible for me as one person to keep up with the weeding of it all. So I just started recently using this weed blocking material. This is from DeWitt, that's the brand. And I specifically recommend the DeWitt brand because I've tried other brands and they just don't last very long. Weeds still grow right through them, but this stuff is great. So I put this over the surface of, you know, anywhere that I can basically, and it's very easy to use. You're just going to roll it out. You're going to stake in some landscape hooks to keep it in place, and then you're going to burn in your holes. So that's how I made this hole here. I just use this blowtorch and it's very easy to burn a little hole here. And what's really awesome is that it has these lines every 1 foot, so that really helps me just evenly space things out. And then I burn these holes every 1 foot to keep in line with square foot gardening and plant spacing. And I'll talk about that in my like planning section, or part 2 of this video. So that is what I use here to prevent weeds. It works great. I haven't had to weed for months and I absolutely love it. So let's talk about another really important resource or building supply, and that is this right here, the whole section here. This is wood chips. So this is a free resource if you can get it, and I'll explain how I get mine. But wood chips is basically, you know, when the tree companies go around and they cut down trees, they mulch it up, right? They chop it up. And so this is rich and full of leaves, which is high in nitrogen, and, you know, sticks and everything that will compost down and make beautiful, rich, dark soil for your garden. So, and it's also free mulch. If you don't mulch your garden beds with something, nature is going to cover it with something of her choosing, and that's usually some weed seeds. So using a lot of mulch or hay, straw, you know, whatever resource you can find. Here in Florida, we have a lot of pine straw. So whatever you can find is a great resource. After you've cleared out your area, I highly recommend that you cover, you know, whether that be the section that you solarized or the bed that you made with the cardboard and compost. A nice couple inches of some mulch is really helpful. It will break down compost over time. It will also conserve water and keep the soil underneath moist for over a longer period of time, requiring less water. And for, you know, crops like tomatoes and things like that that are very susceptible to diseases, it's a barrier between the diseases that live in the soil from splashing up or, you know, climbing up and infecting the leaves and the rest of your tomato plants. So I get my wood chips from a website, and I think it's also an app called chipdrop.com. And so you put in a request, and again, like I said, it's free because the companies that cut down trees actually have to pay to dispose of all of their wood chips. So they're more than happy usually to deliver and give out free wood chips to, you know, homeowners and things like that. So put in a request in there, And well, I'm in a very urban area. I'm located in Orlando, so normally when I put in a request, I get a response in a couple days. It's really fast. And the only downside is they don't tell you when they're coming, so it's very random. I'll just walk out one day and I'll find a huge pile of wood chips on my driveway. And another thing is, you don't know how much you're gonna get. You could get a little bit or you can get a lot. Usually when I get stuff from Chip Drop, it's a lot. It's a pile bigger than my car, and it literally takes me a couple days to shovel and wheelbarrow that stuff back to my backyard, but it's totally worth it. I use these wood chips in my entire garden. I put them underneath all my fruit trees. I mean, it's great. Anything that I have left over, I just keep it as a pile to the side in my garden for later use. And I have to say, when I got my first delivery of wood chips, that was a huge game changer in my garden. I was able to fill up this entire section here with, it was like almost 12 inches worth of wood chips, and that was years ago. So all of that has composted down, and this entire section now has a very rich layer of rich composted down soil that is perfect for growing vegetables. So after you've cleared out the space that you're going to use for your garden and prepped it, got rid of all the weeds, the next step would definitely be to put in a nice layer of mulch, and that mulch also comes in handy for creating your pathways. And if you're enjoying this video and learned something new, make sure you subscribe to my channel. That way you get notified of every time I post a new video. Also, make sure you check out my website, jarrasgarden.com. I have a whole section dedicated to lots of gardening information and monthly growing guides. So if you're wondering what you should be starting from seed or transplanting in the month of January or February, there is a grow guide dedicated to every month. Also, I am a professional heirloom seed grower and plant nursery. So if you see anything in my videos that you want to try growing yourself, check out my website. I have seeds and plants. Alright, so now you've got your garden area pretty well prepped. The next thing you have to consider is, do you need to build any kinds of structures? And that could be raised garden beds, that could be trellis systems like what I have over here. I mean, it's totally optional and it's totally up to you, your budget and your resources. What are you able to find in your local area? And trust me, you can get really creative about all of these things. So I'm going to take you around my garden and kind of discuss some of the different types of setups that I have and materials that I use. But first, you need to decide, are you going to just start planting directly in your native soil, or are you going to want to build like raised beds or something like that to house or encase like garden soil or compost? If I could redo everything, quite honestly, I would say just go ahead and start gardening and growing things in your native soil. Get used to working with your native soil, how to amend it, how to make it even better. That is definitely going to be the cheapest option for you and just better long term. When I started though, I started with a raised garden bed, and I still recommend that, especially if you're a beginner gardener. If you can do that, that'll definitely cut out some of the issues you might experience and just kind of help gardening be a good experience from the beginning and motivate you to continue. But ultimately, I believe you should try and work with your native soil. When I started out, I'm in Florida and we have very sandy soil, and I always thought that nothing could grow in it. It doesn't hold nutrients and compost. Since it's so sandy, things just wash right out. But over the years, I've actually found that there's a lot of benefits to growing in sandy soil, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So don't be afraid to at least trial it and try growing something in your native soil and figure that out, and if that works for you. So initially I had a couple like raised garden beds in this area, but over time, just through composting and doing the wood chips and all of that, again, there's like at least like 12, maybe 15 inches worth of built up soil here that's really rich and composted down. So I removed all my garden beds, and this is just one flat area, and I'm growing straight into the ground. You will need to analyze your native soil first though. Some soils are just like really impossible. I mean, there's sandy soil, loamy, rocky. I would say the rocky and compacted is probably one of the most difficult because it's just so tough to like get in there and till it up. So analyze what kind of soil you have and if you're able to work with it. I am not an expert on soil, but there definitely is some tests that you can do at home to try and figure out what kind of soil you have. Just Google it or find a YouTube video. Basically, you take a soil sample, you put it in like a little jar of water, and depending on how the sediments settle, will give you a good idea of what kind of soil you have. And then once you know what kind of soil you have, you can amend properly. Like for example, here I have sandy soil. It doesn't hold a lot of nutrients, so it's recommended to try and add as much organic matter as you can, like the wood chips, compost, that kind of thing. And fertilizing, having a good fertilizing game is really important. Adding those nutrients on a consistent basis, because again, for example, our summertime, we get monsoon rains every summer, and that just washes all those nutrients away. So giving your plants a little bit of extra fertilizer with the sandy type soils is really beneficial. And lastly, when you're planting a bed or an area that you're going to garden in, I highly recommend that you keep that gardening space like no more than 4 feet wide. That's just so it's easy for you to reach all the way over to the other side if you have to harvest something or whatever. And you can make it as long as you want. Just don't make it more than 4 feet wide. So when I had my garden beds here, they were all 4 feet wide, all long, just long, long rows with about 2 feet in between them just for walking space. Or if you don't have the garden beds, it's the same idea. If you're planting right in native soil, I highly recommend, you know, that planting space be, you know, 4 feet wide, and then you have some space for you to walk. All right, so first off, we have the garden beds. This is a raised garden bed that I built using pressure treated wood. A lot of people like to use cedar because that lasts a long time, but that can be a little more expensive. I really like pressure treated wood. If you're in Florida, I do not recommend that you use just regular untreated wood because it will not last very long. I mean, with all our rain and everything, it definitely will decay quickly. So I've had these pressure treated wood beds for a really, really long time. This actually came off from one of my old beds that I had removed, and I decided to use the scraps to make this beautiful bed. This might be a good alternative if you live in an HOA community and you're kind of worried they might say something, because you can make it look beautiful, you can paint it, and just make it look really, really nice. So when I started gardening, I do have an HOA in my community. I had my beds this way because I was just really concerned if they would say something. And they didn't, but I always kept them looking really great anyways. When you're building raised beds, I also suggest that you get the width from, you know, the floor to the top of the bed to be at least 8 inches, and you're going to want to fill that whole thing up, at least 8 inches worth, with, you know, soil, compost, whatever you can find, because that will allow for good drainage in this garden bed. Also, another benefit is if you're a really tall person or you just don't want to be bending down a lot, you can make the raised garden beds infinitely as tall as you would like. However, the cons for this is cost. I mean, you're going to have to go in and buy the wood. I mean, maybe you can find some extra scraps, you know, from your friends or family, or I've even seen some people find wood pallets for free, and they build, you know, garden beds out of the wood pallets. You're also going to need a couple tools. I am not a handy person with tools. I don't know much about that, but I did build this by myself just using a little hand drill and some screws. And at the time that I built this, I didn't have my own like saw to cut this to the size that I needed. So what I used to do is, if I knew my beds were going to be 4 feet wide, I would buy one 8-foot long plank of wood. And my local big box store like Home Depot and Lowe's, they have a machine in the store where they will cut wood to a certain extent. Usually it's like 4 cuts for you for free. So I would have them cut a 8-foot long board in half to give me 2 4-foot wide boards for the ends of my raised beds. And then I would buy one plank for the other 2 sides, the length that I needed it. That way, if they were the length I needed, they didn't require any kind of cutting. So I usually would buy them 8-foot long, 12-foot long, or even 16-foot long. And another con that I've heard is from other gardeners saying that pressure treated wood leaches chemicals out into your soil. I am not a chemical expert. I don't know how much of that is true or to what effect does it actually affect anything. But all I know is that gardening is a really healthy habit to have. I mean, your family gets to eat fresh, organic produce. So if that is a con, I'm willing to just deal with it and let it be, just so I can garden and grow my food. And if you know anything about that topic, please comment below. I am curious. I just haven't found any research about it really. But if you do know stuff about it and can point to like actual articles or studies, please let me know in the comments below. Another great building material are these cement blocks. I don't know what these are called technically, but they're like building blocks, and they have 2 holes per block. And so these will last forever. And again, I've heard some gardeners say that they leach chemicals. I don't know if that's true. I really don't. Again, comment below if you know anything about that. But I love these things. They last forever. And it's like Legos. You can take them apart, you can build them up taller, you can shorten your garden bed, make it longer, expand. Like, it's the ideas with this is pretty infinite. But what I really love about it is that you can grow things in these little holes. I have some lettuce here and some herbs. So smaller little crops like herbs, lettuce, greens, whatever, they do really well in here. And as far as cost, I want to say the blocks, honestly, if you do a side-by-side comparison of what it would cost you to build a bed with the blocks versus wood, I want to say it's almost virtually the same. But this stuff lasts forever, and you can paint it. And when you're gardening, quite honestly, you're probably gonna have a mix of everything. You'll have some raised beds over here, growing in ground there, or even containers or grow bags like these ones here. I mean, it just depends what you're doing and where you're getting your supplies. You might be in a situation where you're renting and you can't have anything like too permanent. In that case, I definitely recommend these grow bags. Also, grow bags and containers, they drain really well and the soil dries out pretty decently. So they are awesome for growing herbs. Like I grow herbs exclusively in containers so that they get better drainage, because herbs are very susceptible to root rot. So if you've tried growing herbs and you're like, they just keep dying on me, try growing them in containers. But of course there's a cost. You have to buy the containers or, you know, the grow bags, and then you got to get the soil to fill them up with. Get creative. You know, I've seen people recycle like old bathtubs or refrigerators even, and they've turned them into a raised garden bed. You can go check out yard sales and see what you find, or you can even drive around your community on trash day and just see if anyone's throwing something out that you could use as a container. If you do need to buy soil, there's a couple routes for that. If you need a lot of it, almost always buying it in bulk and having it delivered to you is going to cost less than going to the store and hauling all the bags yourself. If you only need a little bit, then you can go to the store and just get a couple bags. Quite honestly, I buy the cheapest bags of compost at my local, you know, hardware store, and they work fine if I just need a little bit. Also, to save money on, you know, soil, you can do what is called hugelkultur. It's a technique where you just go around, gather leaves, sticks, anything that can break down in compost, and you're gonna set that on the bottom of your containers or even your raised garden beds, and it'll help take up space so that you need less soil. And then once you get your soil, you're just gonna cover it right over all the sticks and the leaves. And I forgot to mention one thing about the wood chips and mulch, because you might also have to buy some mulch. Please don't get mulch that is dyed with a certain color. Try to get the most natural kind of mulch that you possibly can find, because those dyes are chemicals that you would be adding to your garden. Depending on what you want to grow, you might need to build some vertical gardening structures. I think that vertical gardening is a must for like cucumbers, whole beans, and tomatoes. Over the years, I've built vertical gardening trellises and structures out of so many different materials, but I've stuck to this one the most. I think this is my favorite because, for one, it's portable. You can take it down really easily, move it around your garden season after season. The materials are pretty cheap, and it's something that I can assemble by myself without any tools. So really quickly, I'm going to show you how this works. All you need are 2 T-posts. So this one right here is a 6 foot or 7 foot tall T-post. The taller the better, to be honest, because the more growing space that you have vertically, the bigger your plants are going to get and the more production you're going to get out of it as well. So the taller the T-post, the better. And then I get these PVC plastic tees like this, and it's just to hold this electrical conduit pipe in place. So I put the PVC pipe up here and I stick the electrical conduit pipe in there. Now this electrical conduit pipe, I get it at Home Depot. It's 10 foot long and it's 3/4 of an inch thick. I do not recommend that you go thinner than that because the bar might bend under the weight of some heavy crops like tomatoes or Tromboncino rapicante if you want to try growing that. After you have the T-post set up with the electrical conduit pipe, you can now weave through, almost like a curtain, this vinyl mesh trellis. And this stuff lasts forever. I've been using the same ones for years. If you want to get the same ones, follow the link to Amazon below in the description. And I always recommend, if you can grow something vertically, do it. Do it that way. Not only does it save you a lot of space, but it picks the plants up off the ground, keeping them away from pests. So if you have a lot of pest issues like I do right here in Florida, it definitely helps. And it also helps prevent diseases because the plants, the leaves, everything is up in the air. There's a lot more wind flow. It'll dry the leaves off quickly, which will help prevent a lot of diseases. Another very important consideration is how are you going to water your plants? Maybe you have a small garden and you can hand water it very easily. personally, I mean, I have a huge garden, but I really like the process of watering plants. It does take me a while, but it also gives me a chance to just be out in the garden, check on my plants. Usually that's when I will notice a lot of pest or disease issues that otherwise maybe I wouldn't be paying attention to it. So I personally like watering and find it relaxing, but maybe you don't, and that's okay. Or maybe you're going to be on vacation or something like that, and you just, you know, you need to make sure your plants are getting watered. So I do kind of use two systems. I hand water, and I also have this flat drip tape installed in my beds because this is the easiest thing for me to use. I'm not very good with tools. I don't know how to work PVC piping and doing that kind of drip irrigation. So for me, the easiest thing is to install this flat drip tape. And I really like the flat drip tape specifically, not the foamy, like circular tubes. Those just deteriorate really, really quickly. They don't last very long. But this flat drip tape lasts me several seasons, and it's pretty inexpensive stuff. All you have to do is just roll it out in between your rows and connect a water hose to it. And then to help with watering my garden if I go on vacation, I do have this Melnor. It's an automatic water timer, so you can program it and set it on to water your plants. So it'll open up these valves here. I have the one with 4 different hose connections. So it'll open up the valve at the set time and release the water into the water hose. And this water hose is then connected to my flat drip tapes. So that is how I water my gardens, you know, if I go on vacation or maybe just don't feel like watering everything. And all the supplies and things that I show in this video, you can find the same ones in my Amazon link. All right, so this has been part 1 of 2 on how to get started gardening or just planting in general. So the part 2 video will cover planting, seed starting, and transplanting.